Good evening, everybody. My name is Osa, and tonight I'm going to be playing some Train Sim World. We're running the Northern Trans-Pennine route, and the only diesel locomotive journey I haven't completed with a gold rating is the travelling post office. So we're going to start with that one. Other than that, we completed all the rest. And then once we've done this one too, well, we'll complete it once at least. May then look into driving some Class 101s. Okay, we are in somewhere. The lights are green, and I just need to stop at Huddersfield. Okay, let's get this train going. Where do switches go? Handbrake is released. Master key on. Okay. Okay, that is working. Should have some lights on. Where are the light switches on this thing? Ah. Desk light switch on. Look, lights on. Cab light right on. Yeah, now we can see where we're going. Oh, watch the speed. We're okay for now. We've got 15. Okay. Okay, let's get the speed up. So once again, we're hauled by Class 47, and we have a rake of Mark 1 parcels carriages. So, no passengers to worry about. Makes a change. How far is it, Huddersfield? 505. 22 miles. Okay. 1 mile we have to slow down to 20, but... Okay. We are running close to the train in front. Depending how long that 20 mile an hour stretch is, we could get a lot closer before we he starts pulling away. Up to 30 miles an hour almost. Drop the throttle. Still got a green light, and next light's green as well. Okay. Probably about that. This is a very steep climb out. % grade would be 1 in 50, which is incredibly rare. Okay, 20 miles an hour through here. Oh! Okay, that's the line to the yard. Oops, we're going a little fast. Yeah, the hill's eased off. There we go. So it should be, as soon as we clear the station, we'll be cleared for 40. I don't know why we didn't complete this with full colours last time. Lights are green. Slipped over the speed limit again. Come on. Okay, we should be good. Yep, there we go. Again, we're just running with semaphore signals here, so we have green lights all the way. Or at least for the next block. At this point, blocks are less than a mile. So they can keep the trains close together. Obviously the speed limit has to be reduced, and we still have a pair of greens. Whoa, what happened there? So 0.8 of a mile to the next lights. To accelerate to 60. Yes, the nice thing about this time of day is you can actually see the lights ahead of time. Looks like we're on to standard light signals rather than the semaphores. So during this era, British Railways was taking down the semaphores, replacing them with usually 4 aspect signals on these sorts of lines. Doing 55. Slowing down again. So the train I used to ride back from North Wales to London used to be similar to this, but they'd carry a couple of passenger cars on it. So the Irish Mail ran from Holyhead with a couple of stops to board the Irish Mail until you got to London. Okay, throttle back on. Yeah, 1 in 10 again. Ooh, that's pretty. The train would leave Holyhead round about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. Get to London for about 6. And I lived in Bangor at the time. So I'd catch the train probably about 1:30, 2 o'clock. What's going on here? Oh, back on semaphores again. Very few other people rode the train, so you pretty much had the whole train to yourself. Apart from the rear, which was all freight, passenger break cars like these, which were full of the mail from Ireland to London. Okay, that's a pleasant cruising speed. As long as the gradient doesn't ease out. Yeah. Going right, 44. Yeah. So again, colour light aspect, colour light signals. To open the throttle up for about the only stretch of the line that we're allowed to do, 75. Not that that helps, because we've got that for about 0.6 of a mile before we have to slam the brakes on. Oh, not even worth it. Acting's a little bit iffy ahead of us. Those trees should be in shade. Okay. Oh, we need a lot of brakes. Okay, brakes off. Sadly, we broke something. Okay. I think I applied the throttle before the brakes had released. But we didn't break the speed limit, we just broke the train. Now forget about this junction. I don't know why we need to slow down to 15 coming through the points from the opposite direction. Unless the junction's not level. And then also this station's limited to 15 as well. So when can we do 60? Soon. It is hard to see things because it's night time. Probably not the best journey to take. See the speed limit signs. Lighting on the trains in this era wasn't great. Unlike America, it was deemed... America's always had bright lights, a single bright light on the front of the train to help with visibility. Britain, not so much. The front of the trains were painted yellow so there were high visibility, but outside of that, the lights were really just marker lights, not so that the driver could see where he was going, because there was nothing to see. All you had to worry about was what the signals were telling you to do. But it's recent years they have added a high intensity light to the front of everything. Even steam rail tours, so steam engines need to carry some form of power source to power that high intensity front light that they are now required by law to carry. And trains don't have to be yellow on the front anymore. So, originally trains could be any colour at the front, but those lights are useless. How are we doing? We are at full power and accelerating really slowly. There's zero chance of stopping before you hit it anyway, by the time you see it. You got to remember, trains are travelling over there 60 miles an hour, up to 100 miles an hour these days. This locomotive, max speed 95. So, I mean, the locomotive was built late 50s, early 60s. So it's one of the first diesel locomotives, mass-produced diesel locomotives produced for British Railways. But at 60 miles an hour, you are travelling a mile a minute, and you're metal on metal. You're not going to stop before you hit something by the time you see it. Especially not with tracks that are curving like this. I mean, my sight is little more than a few hundred yards, and stopping from 48 miles an hour, I don't have a chance. Now, once British Railways took over and started with the diesel power, a lot of the surface rail crossings were removed because you can't have cars driving over train tracks where trains are coming through at 100, in some cases up to 125 miles an hour. You don't want road vehicles or people on the tracks at that point. So they built a lot of underpasses and overpasses for the roads, so that trains and cars do not end up on the same stretch of ground at any point. Now you go to sort of the outlying districts, and you will still find level crossings, gated crossings where cars cross the tracks, and the trains are typically limited to 40-30 miles an hour, sometimes even slower. So but the main lines you just don't want cars on. Now if a car slips down an embankment onto the track, now you've got a problem. And drivers must report possible obstructions on the track, and when they see one, they will radio up the control box and say, okay, there's a person walking along the line, or there's a car down an embankment to the side of the line. At that point, they will reduce the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. So all the light signals will change to a single yellow, which effectively says expect the next light to be red, and you have to be able to stop the train in a few hundred yards when you see that red signal. I moved here in '99, so I was 33, just turning 34. I think. Yeah, about that. Okay, well, we've got the train moving. How are we doing? 13 miles in 17 minutes. Oh, we got to slow down to 45 in 2 miles. Now, I've got all that help, what colour aspect the next signal is. I probably shouldn't if I wanted to play this more realistically. But knowing when the speed limit changes and when the signal lights are coming up just helps, because unless you drive this route day in and day out, it's not something a casual gamer will know. A driver spends months learning the route, where the signals are, where the train where the stops are, where the speed limit changes. Oh, I'm going too fast. Let's reduce power a little. I'm not a train driver by trade, so I know British train signals because I am a railway enthusiast. American train signals, I still don't entirely understand them. Now, I wonder if we can come across anything soon. So, semaphore signals. The top one was a home signal, which means stop. The second one was a distance signal, so which shows an amber or yellow light. An amber or green light. So that tells us the next light's green as well. Oh, we're going to need to slow down soon anyway, so let's drop the throttle. Okay, I have a red light signal up ahead, but I don't know what's what. That's off on a side stick, so I'm cleared for the main line. The higher signal is the main line, the lower signal off to the side indicates a side branch and the side in which it branches off. American signals, you can just have 2 or 3 signals on top of each other, and so long as one of them's green, you're clear to go. At least that's my understanding. Okay, what are we doing? We're slowing down to... No, we are limited to 45. We can put some power back in. And as soon as the tail end of this train clears the entrance to the tunnel, we should be clear for 65 again. So speed limits, I am allowed to do 65 in this stretch, but not at the point where the locomotive passes the speed limit sign, it's where the tail end of the train passes the speed limit sign. Also, British Railways, you always drive on the left. No matter what, you're always driving on the left. And in America, they run a bi-directional rail system, so you can be cleared to drive on the right side, on the right track, or the left track, depending how the controller feels. Also, the railways were built initially for freight traffic. They were a replacement in a lot of cases for the canals around Britain. And so, the primary mover was freight. And not many people used, trains for travel. Obviously initially because people thought if you travelled faster than you could ride on a horse, you'd have a heart attack and your body would fall apart, because the human body wasn't built to travel at 20 miles an hour like trains did. But eventually people got used to travelling, and it was a major way of getting around. So much so that come summer vacation, school time, the railroad companies would lay on masses of passenger trains to the coast so that people could travel down to the seaside for their summer vacation. And the trains would all be marshalled towards the coastal towns at the end of Friday, so that everything was on the coast on Friday night, parked up, ready for Saturday morning. Saturday morning would be a major operation, getting trains into the stations, getting the vacationers loaded on the trains. Oops, I'm doing it again. And then I not managed. I haven't managed. I need to. There we go. We have power. So the vacationers would get on the trains. The trains would travel to London. The vacationers would get off at London. New vacationers would get on at London, and the trains would travel all the way back down to the holiday resorts for the vacationers for the following week. And then over the Sunday, the trains would all be marshalled back to where they were needed for for regular operations. And yeah, I mean, you've got to remember that Britain is small. 400 miles by train is quite possibly quicker than 400 miles by an aeroplane. It's certainly more convenient. As I said, the trains are travelling at 100 miles an hour. The aeroplane isn't until it gets way up in the sky. And by the time it gets way up in the sky, it's time to be coming back down again. So there's no efficiency. You can carry far more people on a train than you can on an aircraft. So it's cheaper in general. I'm really not paying attention to this, am I? 6 miles, we're good. Yeah, in my younger days I used to take trains everywhere. The only bad thing is if you live around London and want to go to somewhere else around London. The problem is that when the railways were developed, all of the railway companies, and there were dozens of them, if they could, wanted a terminus in the capital city of England. So there were dozens of termini in London. But because they were termini for a single railroad company, there was no cross connection from that sort of spur out from London. And even when the railroad companies were amalgamated after the First World War into 4 major companies, the 4 major companies took a quadrant out of London. And they didn't have much in the way around London of interconnecting lines. So if you want to go from East London to North London, you have to go into the centre of London, take a tube round to the next terminus, and then take another mainline train out from that point. And it can take ages. So much so, sometimes it's just easier to take a car. If you're travelling around within 25 miles of London, around the outside, it's easier by car. If you're going straight through the middle, it's easier by train, although you still have to use the tube to get around the middle. And if you're travelling a long way out of London, then it is more efficient to take the train. Yeah, and yeah, with that, it's the economies of scale in distance. A plane is very efficient at travelling a very long distance because it travels at 500 miles an hour. And a train doesn't travel at 500 miles an hour. So eventually you hit the point where the plane is going to get there first. Even Los Angeles to California could be done with a train that averages 100 miles an hour. And it's competitive with an aeroplane. but only if it's cheaper. But traveling from Los Angeles to Dallas, no, you take an aeroplane. I mean, I've done that trip by car, and that took me 3-4 days, depending on which way I was traveling and which way through the time zones I was going. Because it's 25-hour days one way and 23-hour days the other way. It depends. A lot of them are really only 150 miles an hour. And even that is only on specifically built high-speed tracks. And that was the problem with the Channel Tunnel link. I've got a yellow light in 1.5. We are 2.4. Okay, that'll be approaching to Huddersfield, where we have to stop. So, what was I saying? Okay, the train, when the Channel Tunnel was first built, from Paris to the tunnel, the trains were travelling about 150 miles an hour. Through the tunnel, they were limited to about 90 because of the pressure wave that they built up in front of them. And then on the British side, they were limited to 50, 60, 70 miles an hour because they were running on the London commuter lines, which aren't straight. They're built for trains which do multiple stops all the way into London. And so 50, 60 miles an hour was an adequate speed for those trains because they're accelerating and stopping at every station. And so it doesn't matter how straight the line isn't. Now, they obviously, once the Channel Tunnel was built, Britain started working on the high-speed line from the tunnel to a new terminus. And once they built that line was designed to run 150 miles an hour. And it's, if I remember rightly, built on a concrete bed, and very tight tolerances for the tracks, and so the trains can travel at that sort of speed. How are we doing? I probably don't need to be slowing down too much yet. We are downhill though. So, yeah. Those high-speed trains can travel quickly. Now, things like the maglev trains that I believe China's working on, they run very, very fast. But the lines are very straight and very highly engineered. Okay. Can let the brakes off now. Once again, I've blown through the speed limit in a big way. But a train like this on this line is limited to 60 miles an hour. Because the line's not straight, it's not level. Oh, we're going around the outside, okay. And that little two-car train there is limited to 70. Oh, we're not pulling into the station. Oh, okay. And I'm going too fast. And there's another little DMU. Okay. Okay, I need to get 500 yards in 30 seconds. I'm not sure that's going to happen. We're shunted off to the side here, so in theory a faster train could take the lead. Don't think that's going to happen though. The problem is demand. With the US, I mean, it's one of the reasons why, California high speed really is a dumb idea, because they're trying to run it from Los Angeles to San Francisco. The problem is the high speed tracks start about 40-50 miles outside of Los Angeles and end about 50 miles before you get to San Francisco, and they run on the surface commuter lines in the inner cities, and so you don't gain the full benefit of high-speed travel. Plus, not enough people want to travel from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I think I got close enough, so let's come. Okay, now we stopped in the right place. Now, I tell you one way that US high-speed rail would work well, and that is Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Am I allowed to go? Come on, tell me I'm allowed to go. Okay. There we go. Because there are dozens of people every Friday will travel from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and then on Sunday they travel home again. The problem is the demand is Friday night one way and Sunday night the other way. So it's not a great deal. It's of limited benefit, but I'm sure people who did that trip on a regular basis would consider taking a train if it meant that they didn't have to sit in traffic, solid, slow moving traffic. Building trains is difficult. It's expensive. You have to demolish housing and compulsorily purchase land. And in a lot of cases in America, the terrain doesn't make for good train travel. Trains don't do mountains very well, which is why on the line I'm driving on there's so many tunnels, because they don't do mountains very well, and we're actually driving east to west across the the backbone of England, which is a smallish mountain range. Now, where trains do work is inner cities. Dallas has a metro system, not a particularly vast metro system, but it does have one these days. New York, Chicago, they benefit from their subway systems. San Francisco benefits from a subway system because San Francisco is a small, compact city where a subway system works well. Los Angeles doesn't benefit from a subway system. One, because it has a lot of earthquakes, and two, because it's a vast, sprawling city, and a train that averages 30 miles an hour, while that's probably twice the speed or 3 times the speed that traffic's travelling on the freeways, it's still a restrictive mode of transport in that sense. But there is the East Coast line from sort of New York down through Washington. Is not Philadelphia. But travelling down the eastern seaboard, there's a dense population there, and a demand to move around. The other fight you have with train transport is, there's no easy way to say it, but a lot of people see train transport as poor people transportation. And it costs a lot to develop a new train line. And you're not going to make your money back unless you can sell quite expensive tickets. I don't think the California high-speed train is going to compete with we need to slow down a little with air travel on a price basis. And that's a problem. Okay, that signal back there had a little white, what they call a feather, pointing to the left, which means at this point we turn left. And it should be, as soon as I clear that left turn there, we should be clear to speed up again. Maybe not. Okay, we're limited to 50 still. To kill the throttle. We're going uphill, so give it about 40%. Ooh. A well-designed compact city benefits from a subway quite substantially. When you go to London, I would much prefer to travel by tube than I do by surface transport, and I don't like tunnels in any great way. I do not have any power. Okay, brakes running. There we go. We have power. Hear the whistle of the train as we accelerate. So at this point we have 4 tracks here. 2 of these will be fast, 2 will be slow. And they'll be in pairs, so the 2 on this side are opposing levels of travel, and the two on the right similarly, and you can tell that by the signals here. .57, I need to be back in the cab. But yeah, my very last consulting job I had in London. I live northeast of London, just outside the 25 mile an hour mark. And I had a job just inside the 25 mile mark to northwest of London. And so for the interview, I took the train into London, caught the tube round, took a train back out. And yeah, it was a short walk, less than 5-10 minute walk at each end. And it took me 2 hours and cost me a fortune. I mean, it was silly, You're talking $20 a day. Oh, and we're turning left here. I'm going too fast again. Can you release the brakes? Oh, I had the throttle on full as well. That wouldn't have helped. Throttle off, throttle on. Yeah, we have power. And so after the interview, when they offered me the contract, I drove it because frankly I wasn't paying $20 a day. It's $100 a week. And to do it in a car took me 20 minutes rather than 2 hours, and probably cost me $2 in gasoline. And that's where trains don't compete well. The same was with the bus route. I lived in a major town. There was another major town 5 miles away, maybe 10 miles away. And it took the bus an hour to get there and cost as much as parking in the town cost for a one-way trip. So to go both ways, it cost twice a parking fee for an hour. And I could drive it in the car in 10 minutes. And the car was convenient. It went when I wanted to go there, and it came back when I wanted to come back. The bus, I had to go and stand around in the rain for 20 minutes before the bus arrived, and then it was an hour travel to the next town. It's sort of, why do I want to do that? If the travel is convenient, then I'll do it. If it's not convenient, then I'm using personal transport. I haven't ridden on a train in America. When I worked in Los Angeles, I had to go to Dallas. We were flying out of Burbank, and the town I lived in had a train line that went straight past Burbank. So, my wife got me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, drove me to the train station, and I caught a train down to the airport. And it was really nice, it was really convenient. Much better than going by car. But the return trip, I delayed coming back until the Saturday. Trains don't run on Saturday. So my wife had to come and pick me up from Burbank, which she wasn't very impressed with. How are we doing on time here? 20 minutes, 15, 7 miles, although there is a lot of 10 mile an hour track into Leeds. Yeah, and it does. When I lived with my parents and worked in London, the all-zone travel pass just for the tube network was something like $100 a year, which is really convenient. Now, I had to have it for work, but I could then use it every other day of the year when I wasn't working to go anywhere in London. The problem with my consultancy job was I wasn't on the tube network, and the place I was working at wasn't on the tube network, so we had higher fees to get from outside the tube network into it, and vice versa. Which is why that ended up costing $100 a week, or would have done. I'm not going fast enough. Come on, train. Let's go. Miles, 15 minutes. We're probably going to end up late to our destination. Okay, slow down to 50 and 10. 2. In this era of British Rail, so long as you were within half an hour, I think people accepted, yeah, that was about the thing. Trains were never particularly on time during the 70s, 80s. Back in the days of steam, when there were still the steam railroad companies, the only trains that had a timetable, a specific timetable, were the main ones that travelled from South Wales to London, or Edinburgh to London, or Glasgow to London, or vice versa. And those trains had a timetable they had to keep to. And in some cases it was a matter of prestige keeping to that timetable. But all of the feeder lines, the only requirement was you were at the mainline station when that mainline train came through heading to London. Otherwise you got in trouble, because the whole point of the feeder line was to get passengers who wanted to go to London to the mainline station to catch the London train on time. Because the feeder lines were loss leaders, but the railway companies understood that to get the volume of people on their prestige trains, they needed those feeder lines and were willing to subsidise them. And in the 1950s, after British Rail took over, British Railways, the government, took over running the trains. It became a matter of saving money. It depends. The mainline trains, especially in England, there was more competition. Two of the railroad companies went from London to Birmingham by different routes, but you got passengers by getting there before the other guy did. London to Scotland, there was constant competition between the London Midland and Scottish Railway and the London and North Eastern Railway as to who had the fastest trains and who was able to get their passengers to Scotland the quickest. Now, in other areas where only single lines went to, it was less of a thing, but yeah, there was prestige in having the fastest train or having the train that could get people there the fastest, and obviously the safest. But as I said, the feeder lines were definitely a case of you got there when you got there, but there was a strong push by management that if you were going to a mainline station, you were timed to arrive when the London train arrived, or you had to wait until the train from London arrived so that you could take the passengers home. But once they were on the feeder line, no, you got there when you got there. He didn't have much of a timetable to keep to, so long as he was back at the mainline station for the next departure or arrival from London, to or from London. Okay, 25 miles an hour in 1.7 miles. We have 2.2 miles, so we're coming up to the slowdown point. I've still got 9 minutes to get there. Oh, but we might be catching up to a train ahead of us. Signal 200 yards, 100 yards. Yellow signal ahead, and it just turned green. Have a yellow line, light ahead. I'm not slowing down fast enough. I'm now breaking the speed limit by a big margin. Okay, double yellow means the next light is yellow, the light after is red because there's a train in the block. So this block and the next block are clear. And slowing down to 20. Very good. Rolling downhill, quite a steep hill. Yards. How are we doing? We're actually minutes early. That might be a problem. So single yellow means the next light is probably red. Is definitely red. Or they're trying to force me down to a slow speed. Platform 12 is out. point of arrival. Oh, and now I need to be doing 10 miles an hour. Missed the speed limit change again. Okay, light ahead is still yellow. It's probably single. So in some places those lights will be set to yellow because they need me down at 10 miles an hour, and it's just another reminder to the driver that I need to be slowing down. And from here on in we proceed incredibly slowly. Okay, there is no hill. Well, there is no grade. Okay, next signal is red. And we are calling at the station. Keep rolling, train. There we go, we're good. And we have arrived. Okay, what's next? Leave the marker light on, at least for now. Do I need to make the train safe, or are we good? But we probably have to wait 2 minutes. So this is a parcels car. So this should be loaded up with first class mail, or mail, all the way through here to the back. On a passenger train, that's where the guard lives. I can't get in there. So he has a handbrake, and he will use that door. I can't put the window up, okay. It says guard, but there will usually be one car like this on a train, so that if you're taking a bicycle with you or anything else, that that's where you store it. Large boxes and what have you. Suitcases. Rather carry it in the passenger cars. This train, as I said, no passenger cars on it. And more parcels cars over there, guards vans over there. Known as brake vans because they have a handbrake, and the passenger cars don't. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 0. We're here. Hello. Well, this is exciting. Oh, there we go. So a couple of bad braking points where we exceeded the speed limit very briefly. Did we make gold?